Well, somewhere around the year 1000, maybe as late as 1050, there was this explosion in Western Europe, um, mm, broadly defined. The lines between Western and Eastern Europe in those days were not as tightly drawn as they are now. But it was a remarkable period. Sometimes it's called the 12th century Renaissance. I don't know. I think starting around the year 1000 and stretching up until about 1315, approximately, there is just 300 years of change after change, and sometimes magnificent change. And actually, I don't know that Western civilization, even in the days of the Romans, at the height of the Roman Empire, I'm not sure that anything quite of this magnitude occurred. Just, you see a sudden explosion of creativity and change. And of course, this is the age of the beautiful cathedrals. And of course, it might take 100 years or so to build one of these. But anybody who's ever been inside one or stood outside one and marveled at it, it's just interesting. It's compelling to see this. The same thing, of course, goes in an intellectual fashion to new philosophies. This is a statue of Peter Abelard, and Abelard, of course, is famous for a whole range of things, some of them personal. But nevertheless, Abelard, with his famous treatise Sic Non, yes and no, essentially taking both sides of a question and examining how to analyze questions. It's a way of not just repeating what has gone before you, which was very typical medieval up to this point, but rather trying to find a logical way to discern what is accurate and what is inaccurate, and that's a step that not even the ancients did. Although sometimes the ancients did engage in measurement and things such as that, the rigid, logical, rational approach to trying to tell the difference between one idea and another, or one measurement and another, dates to people like Peter Abelard, and is a very important part of the becoming of modern civilization. Science, you have people like Roger Bacon. Bacon is often remembered for his contributions to the idea of empirical fact. Can the five senses detect it? Forget about God, forget about angels, forget about whatever. Can you prove it through the five senses? Bacon, I suppose, is most remembered for his work on optics and his analysis of the eye and the nervous system behind it, which is not something we think of in the medieval period, but certainly during this period, the High Middle Ages, people such as Roger Bacon, and by the way, was a Franciscan friar, really contribute to a growing modernism in this. Now, much of Bacon's work is taken from Arabic thinkers, but Bacon put it together, and in many ways, he was also someone who added, in the sense that he actually did try to find out what was going on, and not just reason it out. Politics, of course, Frederick II. Frederick the Great, magnificent, or whatever term, he was a German emperor. Remember, the so-called Holy Roman Empire is actually a German empire. And he did all kinds of things. He wrote a truly good book on falcons. He did some experiments which were kind of remarkable. Certainly not would not be allowed these days. For instance, he gathered a group of children at one point, isolated them in a room, infants, and the people who were attending the infants were not allowed to talk to them or anything such as that, so that when they began to speak, um, the we could find out what the original language of the human beings were. Um, this is kind of a grotesque experiment by today's standards, but it shows what's going on here. Is people are trying to observe, trying to create rules. This is a, we're not talking about reasoning from the top down. Now we're talking about reasoning from the bottom up, inductive theory, and it's very important. And uh, certainly, uh, Frederick II had a very realistic notion of politics. He anticipates Machiavelli in many ways, and is probably has a better claim to be the first true political scientist than Machiavelli does. Um, New Paris. This is Matilda of Tuscany, and basically lived and owned a large chunk of northern Italy, and was probably the wealthiest person on in Europe at this time. Certainly one of the most powerful, um, militarily oriented, very capable, and it was not unusual. I referred to Peter for a woman to have these kinds of roles. Um, I referred to Peter Abelard and the fact that he had some interesting sidelights to his career, one of which happened to be that he was a tutor for a woman, for a young lady who belonged to a good family. Impregnates her, but that doesn't stop her from becoming the head of a convent. So these things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. And of course, religion. This is Saint Francis, and Francis, of course, has a different point of view about things like monasteries and monks and stuff like that. People will be friars, that is, brothers. Um, and here, this is a story from called The Wolf of Gubbio, and it shows Francis being kind to animals, which of course he's known for, and it's the reason why you have statues of Francis in your backyard, holding the bird feeder. But nevertheless, it's important to recognize that there is a new sensitivity to the idea of life here, and that essentially Francis saves the wolf of Gubbio from being hunted down and exterminated. Um, in exchange for which, by the way, the wolf of Gubbio now takes on the personality of the protector of the town of Gubbio. So, I could probably talk now for 42 hours. That's how long a course in the High Middle Ages takes. Um, but I have to do it quickly here because I only have 15 minutes on YouTube. But the world was the medieval world, whether you're in Europe or whether you're in the Middle East under the caliphs, or whether you're in China under the emperors. This is a period of time of almost incredible advancement. The whole idea of what it meant to be human and to live in the universe changed, and the idea of what human beings could do changed in the High Middle Ages. And I think the Middle Ages get a little bit short shrift here by most people, but it's important to note that people of the Middle Ages emerge as real people. We actually know what St. Francis looked like. We actually know what some of the popes looked like. And that's not always true in the Middle Ages. But there's a new sensitivity, new ways of thinking things, and a new desire to be daring, and a new way of being daring. So I think all of these things are important. And I think that the fact that this is all about to come to a shuddering halt because of disease shouldn't keep us from recognizing what happened in the 11th and 12th and 13th centuries and how important they are for determining who we are today. Anyway, have a good day. And as I always say, stay healthy. And I hope we'll meet again someday. So take care. Bye bye.